Well, hello, justice and restorative justice champions, and welcome to the 14th episode of RJ webinar series. I'm really excited about this topic today, and I've been meaning to cover it for some time, but I just never found the time. But now I'm in lovely Cyprus, and as you can see, I've got my blue skies behind me. And a bit of peace and quiet. So the topic I'm going to cover today is about punishment and about this concept of restorative punishment that I've been writing about and I've covered in a few of my lectures and presentations. And I think like the last two episodes, well, I hope like the last two episodes on power and raising power, this one would also be as useful and as popular. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just explain my thinking, what I've written about punishment and how I see punishment through the restorative justice lenses, and how you have been exercising this kind of punishment since ever. And I'm going to try and explain my thinking and what sources I use from philosophy, from practice, from my own experiences, and from my research to justify my claims. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a case study that took place not long ago, in fact a couple of weeks ago, when I held the first annual international conference of the organization I set up, the Restorative Justice International Institute. We had a conference over 2 days where we released findings of 3 projects. And over 190 people came from 27 countries to participate in the conference. And one of the topics was on restorative justice, healing and mental health. And one of the workshops that actually took place created these elements that I'm going to describe and make what I call restorative punishment and restorative pain. And I'm going to play that video as part of this webinar to demonstrate, but also to allow you to participate in restorative punishment in action. So just starting with punishment, just the concept of punishment. And if you study justice or law or any kind of social sciences and cover the topic of justice, they tell you that punishment in its current form is exercised to create some sort of pain because something wrong has taken place. And that wrong is usually described in the law. So the law, independently of what country you are, and if the rule of law is in place, would define what crime is. And as a result of being convicted or found guilty of that act or omission of act, which constitutes crime, then a punishment will result from it. And that punishment, according to now many theories, is justified for a number of reasons, and the oldest justification of punishment is described even in the Bible in the form of eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, and we described it as just desserts, and that's the just desserts theory, punishment theories. So you did something wrong, then you should be punished for it. Now, several other theories, of course, followed, and one of the most popular ones is about deterrence, and deterrence aims to have a specific but also a general impact, and the specific impact is, of course, to deter, to make the person who committed that act, that crime, to not do it again. So that's the specific type of deterrence. And obviously general deterrence is when that message that the person who did that act, the crime, has been punished, and therefore others should see that punishment, and if they're ever thinking of doing that harm or that crime to anybody else, they should know that they will be punished in the same way, and that's the kind of general deterrence. Other famous justifications, popular justifications, is rehabilitation, of course. And that means that if you do something wrong, then you should be punished so that you are rehabilitated, so that you enter into a process of, learning not to do it again. It's a softer version of the other theories, and it means that the process that you enter aims to make you a better person, so that at the end of it, you come out of it and you don't want to do the crime again or the bad act again. So this is kind of general theories of what justifies punishment, and obviously in terms of its form, we have several forms, and one of them, the most famous one, obviously, is imprisonment. So you committed a crime, then you go to prison. There are other kinds of punishments, of course, including paying money, penalties, being taken out of the community, doing community sentences, and so on and so forth. So these are kind of different forms of punishment. Now, that's their general stuff. So now we move forward to restorative justice. This is the RJ webinar series. So what is this groundbreaking, innovative, interesting theory and justification that I'm introducing? Well, there's a lot in the literature about punishment, the relationship of restorative justice and punishment. And in all honesty, since I started studying restorative justice many years ago, I really struggled with the relationship between restorative justice on the one hand and punishment on the other. And I struggled. And I've read the kind of the different things that are in the literature, and if I could classify them into simply just two groups, I would say there's those who say that restorative justice is an alternative form of punishment, and those who say that restorative justice is an alternative punishment. The latter group says an alternative punishment simply because they don't accept that it's a state-inflicted punishment. It is not done by the state. It's done by the restorative justice practitioners, and it is not aimed at what the state punishment, state form of punishment aims to do. Is an alternative punishment, the other group is saying, because independently of whether it is imposed by the state or not, it does have consequences for those who take part, for the offender who takes part, and that is whatever decisions they make at the end of the process, whether that is mediation, family group, conference and circles, and so on. So that's the kind of the groups of the two main groups, and there's various variations and a lot of detail that goes into those writings. And I'll put in the webinar some sort of articles that I've written, which includes bibliographies of hundreds of documents that have been written on this topic. I don't agree with any of those groups, and I don't think that restorative justice is either an alternative punishment or alternative to punishment. I'm saying that restorative justice offers something different and something new. I call it restorative pain, and there is not an easy way to explain this concept other than just giving you an example of what I experienced, and is when it kind of hit me and I knew what restorative justice offers that is not punishment in the form that I just described. So here I am. It was a few years ago during Restorative Justice Week, which takes place on the third week of November every year. And I was invited to go to Canada, where Restorative Justice Week actually came from. And then it was made kind of an International Restorative Justice Week initiative. And I was invited to go to a prison. It's called Ferndale Institution, which is outside of Vancouver. And in that prison, there were some inmates that met in the form of Restorative Justice Circle. And I was invited to participate in that circle. I didn't know these people. I knew about their crimes and nothing else. I walked into the room. They were already there, 20 or so of them, 22 of them. And we sat around the circle. And I remember it was, as I said, it was very close to Christmas. It was very rainy and cold outside. So we kind of started talking about their experiences, and there was no agenda. These people were already in prison. It wasn't a restorative circle to reduce their sentence. It was a restorative circle to help them understand, the consequences of their doings, help them heal, and as part of their rehabilitation process. Now, there are some projects in prisons, restorative justice projects in prisons, and there's various articles on this, the sycamore tree and so on. This was not particularly part of any project, but the prison endorsed this kind of practices in the prison, and it showed that it had a good impact on the offenders, and they wanted it. So it wasn't by coincidence that 22 of them, these really big, tall guys, looking at me, me coming from completely different country, dodgy accent, and a small person looking at them and saying, what does he want here? But there I was. There the circle started, and he got to this guy who was sharing about his experience and what he did, which was actually quite serious. It was a series of crimes, but I think the most serious one was he was a rapist, and he didn't actually speak so much about his crime, but what he said was that, as I said, it was close to Christmas, and he said, look, I know what I did. I deserve to be in here, but there's somebody who doesn't deserve what they're going through, and that is my 93-year-old mother, who I know is her last Christmas, and she's going to be alone because my father passed away and I don't have any other person in the family. And he started crying, this big man with the tattoos and the very fearful outlook, especially when I first met him, suddenly just became this very vulnerable individual who was very calmly and generously sharing his feelings and how he felt. He was putting his mum into a very difficult situation, spending Christmas on her own, her last Christmas on her own, and he just didn't feel that she deserved that and that he was imposing that onto her. And then once he started sharing that and started, crying, I saw people's faces change and they relaxed more, and they started sharing their own stories. And it got to a point where the talking piece, and I don't know if you know how restorative circles take place, but there is the talking piece that passes on from one person to another, and only the person who has the talking piece can speak, and people respect that. So the talking piece came to me, and I had already heard the story, and it wasn't long after my own father passed away. And without knowing and without realizing, I started sharing my story about my dad and the relationship I had with my dad. I had no intention whatsoever. It did not even cross my mind when I was driving to Ferndale Prison that I would ever speak about my dad. And once I started sharing, I started having similar feelings and became tearful. And at some point, halfway through my story, I felt connected with these individuals. I felt connected with the rapist. I felt connected with the space. It was not my space, but it became my space. Those people became my people, and the rapist became my man. And I just felt so cleansed and relieved once I finished my story. And then after me, others followed. And where I intended to stay for an hour, I stayed for many hours. And by the end of it, we exchanged addresses, and I promised that I will write to them, to the prison, and they will write to me back and continue our discussions. So why am I sharing this story? Because as I was driving back, I thought, oh my God, what did I do? I just broke my principle of being distant and remote and cold when I am doing my job, and I mixed my personal feelings with work, and I was like, I don't think that's something wrong. In fact, it was quite cleansing, and that word cleansing started to create a chain effect of thought and reflection. And I remembered my Greek tragedy experience, where I would watch the pain and the tragedy of Antigone, for example, and I would crave and seek for that pain. And by the end of it, by the end of the tragedy, I would feel cleansed. And I remembered my ancient Greek readings and the word catharsis. And catharsis in Greek means cleansing. Cleansing that comes through emotions, and through emotions that you trigger. And that resonated and connected with me, because it was just literally the experience I just had with the prisoners in Ferndale Prison. What I experienced was a Greek tragedy of emotions where we pursued ourselves. No state inflicted them on us. We initiated that. One story led to another story, and the pain was self-inflicted. And that pain, and this is the key, that pain is what triggered a process of transformation, which by the end of it cleanses the person and makes it new. Now let me go back to the theories of punishment and why I don't think that restorative justice is an alternative to punishment or an alternative punishment. So if punishment, which etymologically, by the way, punishment comes from the Greek word bini, which means pain, fun enough. So if the traditional form of punishment in the form of pain comes from the top-down, state-inflicted forms of imprisonment and so on, this one, it's different independently of whether it's not about who imposes, it's not about the state or the community or the mediator imposing this pain. It's a self-inflicted pain. Restorative justice creates a knock-on effect through this punishment, through this pain, that has nothing to do with anyone else apart from yourself. And I remember Aristotle. I'm a big fan of Aristotle. If you read any of my philosophical writings, I keep going back to Aristotle. And Aristotle was trained medically, and he said, he wrote about catharsis, and he said that it's a homeopathic form of treatment, catharsis. It's we seek that treatment ourselves, knowing that it would do good. I'll give you an example. I see sometimes my cat, Cleo, eating my plants, and then she goes and vomits. And I'm thinking, why in the name of God this cat is crazy enough to go and eat my plants and then go and vomit? Is the homeopathic treatment. The animal knows there's something wrong with them, they need to get it out. So what do? They go and eat something that is supposedly bad to then heal themselves. What this is, and I'm sorry about the bad example, but this is what restorative punishment, restorative pain is. It's a form of pain, a bad thing that will then lead to a good outcome. And we might not know ourselves consciously that we're pursuing that, but we want it. If we truly want to heal, if we are hungry to improve what we feel about what we did or what we didn't do, then we homeopathically want that treatment and seek for it. And it has nothing to do about being alternative to the punishment we know or an alternative to punishment. It's about what we ourselves seek through the self-infliction of pain. And catharsis is not a moment. Catharsis is a process. It's the restorative process that we enter. And it might happen over many sessions, over many meetings. And I've written about different steps that practitioners can take. I've just released a book about this, but before that I've written about restorative pain and catharsis and tried to justify it philosophically. And why did I justify I felt that I had to justify it philosophically? Because if restorative pain does cause pain, which is something bad, then that must be justified. Anything that is creating some sort of form of pain and harm must have a justification and a reason. Otherwise, it's done for its own ends and is just purposeless. So the writings I've published in various journals and books talk about the different sources that I'm using, including Aristotle, including Nietzsche, who in The Birth of Tragedy, would you believe, he wrote about this tragic pleasure that we seek to transform ourselves, and this is exactly what I am talking about. So all in all, restorative justice offers restorative punishment, and restorative punishment creates restorative pain. Restorative pain is the result of restorative catharsis. Restorative catharsis is the outcome of a restorative process, whether that's in a form of circles, mediation, conferencing, it does not matter. What does matter is that the person, the parties themselves, homeopathically aim for that treatment that will trigger change and transformation. Now, I'm not saying that every time restorative justice takes place, it would lead to a restorative catharsis, cleansing, restorative pain. The practitioner has responsibility to ensure that that takes place, and there's a lot of preparation that needs to take place before that. Now, how do we go about encouraging parties to enter genuinely into this process and willingly create pain within themselves? There's various ways, but one way that I started to explore very recently is through the form of art. you won't be surprised because, as I said before, I used theatre and tragedy to make these connections with catharsis and pain. But another more kind of easy, accessible during sessions form of art is drawings and designs. And by images, by presenting images, parties can trigger feelings, and then once feelings are triggered, then emotions are set, and then one thing can lead to another. I will put up the 4 steps to restorative pain. There's 4 practical steps that are in a little handbook, and it starts from first realizing who we are ourselves as practitioners and watching ourselves, to then moving on to designing our practice with our users and allowing them voluntarily to enter into this form of practice that we co-design with them. The third step is to actually trigger these emotions through art, for example, and I'm using different designs and different images, whether it's to cause emotions of pain or emotions of hope or emotions of so on and so forth. And the final stage, of course, is agreements and follow-up. As I said, I will complete this video with a little video from the conference, and this is, I'm going to do a little bit of an introduction because there is an introduction by the RJ4All project officer who led on this project, and this is a workshop as part of that project, which also will come up on your screens, and you can read about it because it generated lots of other publications and trainings, including trainings on how to use art for healing and how to understand and implement restorative justice art. And this video is about a mother from Lithuania who took care of her son who needed her because of his difficulties. And she goes through that process. She explained that process. She cannot speak English, so there is translation, but funny enough, the translation happens through her son. And what happened in that room was the triggering of emotions that then led to people through the story, but also the art that the mother chose through the slides that our project officer presented, created the emotions within the participants that then led to discussions and a restorative dialogue. I will conclude by saying that please stop thinking of restorative justice as if it's some sort of small little practice that would divert crimes and criminals. Restorative justice is a form of art. Restorative justice is a way of living. Restorative justice is an ethos. And if you believe in it, it will transform our life, your lives, our lives. If you don't believe in it, then you would just use it for different small ends. You will tick boxes, and here we go again with what we're experiencing with the current criminal justice system.
I'm related to them directly. Remy is my mother and Juozas is my brother, and they are the reason why I myself, growing up, found art as an escape mechanism. And I want you to understand, maybe have just a different perspective of their experience. And how it is done is we will do the slide presentation with pictures and words describing feelings, as well as incorporate different art chosen by my mother. And she will share her experience in the native language, and my brother will read out the translation in English. And I will each of you give the paper with exact text, just to make sure you understand well what is said, just for the frequency perspective. So if I can invite you to join me, and I will or you can maybe share across each other.
Sveiki, ačiū, kad atėjote čia šiandien. Aš esu Remilija, mano Jurgis sūnus ir aš noriu pasidalinti su jumis savo gyvenimo istoriją.
Hi everyone, thank you for coming here today. My name is Remilija and I would like to share with you my experience as a carer from adult son Jurgis. I choose various art pictures to represent my present feelings.
Šitoje nuotraukoje aš laukiuosi trečio vaiko, man 30 metų, aš žinau, kad bus berniukas, gyvenu laukimu ir žinau, kad bus su jam viskas gerai.
In this picture, I am 30 years old. I am pregnant with my child Jurgis. Feelings, content, safe.
Šitoj nuotraukai dešiniai pusėje yra 8 mėnesių Jurgis ir mes švenčiame jo krikštynas ir aš esu pilna meilės ir laimės.
In this picture on the right, my son Jurgis is 8 months old and we are celebrating his christening. I feel content, safe and joyful. I yet to learn that 3 months from now, Jurgis will get flu-like symptoms, which escalate to life-threatening illness and then coma for 8 consecutive days.
Jurgiui 2 metai, jos susirgimas paliko pėdsakus, aš nežinau, koks jis vaikas, jisai sunkiai vaikšto, sunkiai kalba. Aš jaučiu, kad jis turi problemų, bet aš neturiu jokios pagalbos, nei iš profesionalų, nei iš gydytojo ir aš jaučiau tik tai viena pati, kaip jam paliko pėdsakus. Ta liga.
Fast forward, Jurgis is 2 years old on this picture. His illness was long over, however, you are still dealing with the consequences. Around that age, Jurgis was struggling to walk and talk, which was unusual for his peers. I felt that something is happening, but I do not have enough information or external support to deal with it. I felt I'm struggling to breathe sometimes. However, I was still hopeful he will be perfectly fine. I was in denial.
Šitoje nuotraukoje Jurgiui 8 metai, bet kadangi mokykla negalėjo jo priimti, jis paprastoje mokykloje nepateko, todėl jis gyveno pas mano tėvus, paprastesnėje mokykloje, kad galėtų mokytis.
In this picture, my son is 8 years old. He has been living with my mother for the last 2 years as a school close by was not able to provide him with sensitive education. Says he will live away from his family for next 2 years, feeling but hope less fear more denial.
Čia mano sūnus eina į 5. klasę, grįžo namo, mes bandysim prisitaikyti paprastoje mūsų mokyklai. Už juo stovi vyresnis brolis Dovydas, kuris jį prižiūrės.
My son is family home for good. We are celebrating first day of school. First school day in year 5. His older brother will always have his back. I felt uneasy, not knowing how the school will accept Juozas and if he will able to adapt second time around. I started to experience more recognition from professionals concerning my son's conditions. However, I will come across very analytical and vague with no practical solutions. Feelings uneasy, intense dilemma.
Čia Jurgiui 14 metų, jis grįžo iš ligoninės, autoavarijos pasekmė, 6 mėnesius gydėsi, kol sugijo koją. Dar prieš tai jam buvo nutrauktas pirštas. Aš supratau, kad aš esu viena ir tos pasekmės liko iki dabar.
Juozas is 14 years old. He just came back from hospital after 6 months of treatment. He was severely injured during road accident. Months prior to this, he lost his finger. In both instances, he was under supervision by our family members. I was alone dealing with aftermath. I learned I cannot trust anyone to look after my son. Feelings alone, disappointed, intense, determined.
Po daugelio operacijų ir gydymo planų, mano sūnus galėjo vėl atsigauti, varžytis ir su visais kitais vaikais savo amžiuje. Norėčiau padėkoti žmonėms, karatė mokytojai ir daugelį kitų žmonių, kurie padėjo pasiekti jo geriausio rezultato. Tuo metu aš juo didžiuojuosi.
After most surgeries and several psychical treatment plans, my son once again was able to recover and compete with other children of his age.
Yra 22 metai. Mes gyvename kartu dviese jau 5 metus nuo tada, kai aš išsiskyriau su jo tėvu. 2 metai prieš šią nuotrauką jis patyrė pirmą psichologinį šoką, sutrikimą ir pirmą kartą atsidūrė ligoninėje. Bet vis tiek jis baigė koledžą, įgavo 5. lygį. Šaunuolis.
Juozas is 22 years old. We are living together for 5 years since his father and I filed for divorce. 2 years prior to taking this picture, Juozas experienced first mental collapse and hospitalization. Despite this, he managed to achieve level 5 degree in college education. feelings harder, determined, intense.
Mano sūnui čia 28 metai. Jis tuo metu jau ligoninėje buvo 4 kartus iki šios dienos. Jurgiui pagaliau nustatyta psichinė negalia. Pagal Lietuvos įstatymus jisai jisai gali gyventi vienas, pats suaugęs žmogus. Ir aš viską priėmiau kaip realybę, susitaikiau su tuo ir noriu padėkoti kitiems savo 2 sūnum, kurie buvo su manim, nes aš viena būčiau pasiklydusi. Noriu padėkoti savo tėvams, kurių dabar jau nėra, kad aš gavau palaikymą, meilę.
My son is 20 years old. He has been sectioned 4 times to this day. He was finally assessed as mentally disabled. However, in eyes of law in Lithuania, he is fully functioning adult who can live his life independently, as self-sufficiency. I had to accept this reality and found gratitude for all love received. Therefore, I would like to say thank you to my other 2 children. Without you, I will be lost. I would like to say thank you to their father for trying his best. I would like to say thank you to my parents for understanding, support, and love.
Jurgis yra labai geras vaikas. Jis yra švelnus, pakantus ir aš jam linkiu, kad jisai siektų savo tikslų, eitų savo keliu. Ir aš dėkoju Dievui ir jam, kad jis pasirinko mane, kad aš galėčiau jį pažinti ir gyventi toliau su meile. Sėkmės.
Likewise, I would like to thank you to you, Jurgis, for being a very good child. Good luck, my son, in reaching your purpose. Thank you for choosing me and blessing me with your love.
Apologies that it's not very funny presentation. Now, I think maybe anyone will be brave enough, no pressure, if resonates the story with their personal experience, to share it back to my mom. So this restorative dialogue will happen. If you don't feel brave, it's okay. Maybe you feel brave to come and speak with her after. So is there any volunteers to do it now, or please say I or love?
Tik tai gyvenimas, čia yra tai gyvenimas.
This is alive.
Čia yra tai gyvenimas.
Only alive.
Please.
So I don't have a personal experience, but can I just make a comment in general?
Okay.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you so much for sharing that story. It was extremely touching, and I'm glad you were able to be so vulnerable and express that. It really touched me. I also wanted to talk about, ask a question about, in the eyes of the law in Lithuania, he was seen as a fully functioning adult. So is there any information you could, what was the support put in place, and what constitutes as a fully functioning adult in Lithuania? If you have any information on that.
Maybe I can klausti, kodėl kaip čia tai kalbant, kad Lietuvoje tai visiškai savarankiškas
Štai tas turi būti žmogus be galvos.
My mom said in Lithuania you have to be missing half of your upper half of your body to be considered as in needed a carrier support. So for example, when he goes to the hospital, when he has his breakdowns, they don't share that information with her, even though he's in that condition, because he's an adult, so it's his medical file. So there is no...
Life?
Pasveikinimo ačiū, kad nesuteikia pažinimo. Kad atsivėrė, kad labai daug drąsos. My mom said that it was this vulnerability that she was forced by me, which is partially true. I plead the fifth. So, but thank you.
I'm directing this at you, Juozas. Thank you, because you have been very courageous, very brave, because you've had to let us understand about your life. It is hard when you have to talk about yourself like you're not there. Yeah? And I see on your face at times it was difficult. And to say, you touch me, I hold my hand here because you touch me here. You are brave and your family have been there to support you, but thank you.
That's a very good point raised, that he was reading the story as he's not part of the story.
Oh yeah.
That was done intentionally.
Right.
Because this presentation, it was said to be this way, so it only shows perspective of one person, and I find it very suiting that he will be reading her story as he will be some sort of detached presenter in the news.
But he's not going to be a detached presenter. And I'm just responding emotionally to a potential, the psychological experience of reading about yourself third person, and actually someone else's quite valid emotional experiences being acknowledged, yet in some ways there isn't that kind of spotlight on actually Juozas and his experiences, and that's what hit me. And I'm not invalidating or negating your family's experience, I was just very aware of reading about yourself in the third person, and actually it's your life that is being read about. But I understand the intricacies of the dynamic that you're presenting there.
And now she had a question which I want you to, she asked a question of me, but maybe indirectly to you guys. She experienced you kind of mortified as a group by this story. Is that accurate, or she's projecting maybe? Like, how does anyone feel? Yes, please.
I didn't feel mortified. I felt very grateful that you took us on that journey in time and spoke about it. And I think that was very powerful. And you've done it through words and you've done it through images. And I just want to say thank you as a family for sharing that. So I wasn't mortified.
She said that it's one of a million stories. She doesn't feel that she lives an interesting life.
Yes, so for me, I was not mortified. I'm a mother as well. And when you're a mom, just thinking how, I work with a lot of younger women who don't have children, and I always try to explain what it feels like to be a mom, and how it is like if you have, if a part of your body, right, that you love and it's part of you, and how they act on their own, and they are their own person, but at the same time they're completely connected to you. So that's how I explain it to them, how it is to be a mom. So for me it was so painful to feel we all know that there is disability and there are like things that can happen to your children, and just like the biggest fear you can have that one of your children would go through this. So for me it was just empathy more than, because it just felt really, and also it was interesting to me that she's explaining her feelings, right? She's telling her story, but you don't speak English.
She speaks Russian because he was learning Russian.
Yeah, so this is very interesting to me because he is making her voice heard. So to me this is very interesting. It's like giving back to your mom, like she helps you and she's telling her story about helping you, and then you are giving her a voice. And this is very symbolic to me. I'm an immigrant, so the language thing, right? And it was just really, really interesting how it was done to me. Thank you.
Oh, sorry. And she said as well, she doesn't understand why people crying, because it's not a big deal. Like it just, it's just.
Feel kind of scared.
It's my mom now worried that she upset people.
No. It puts us in touch with feelings that maybe we wouldn't have at this moment, but maybe we remember things. I think it just brings things, right, to the surface, right?
Well, I resonated two things. One is that I have mental illness in my family, so I kind of know it pretty close how it goes. And what I really liked, not the lyrics, but the images, is the journey of the first image with safety, the colors, and as it came back at the end, somehow it was love and gratitude, but I could see the same colors. So I think when living in a very close relationship with somebody who has mental illness, it in the first place, I think there's a very strong grief losing safety. That world won't be a safe place for a long time. So especially I think on the denial part. And then when you discover that you can make up this safety inside, regardless the outside world, that's a very nice path. And I've seen this from the images, so this is what resonates me the most. And the second is connected to this, is that my favorite character from Greek mythology is Chiron, the wounded healer. So I think it is very, if you want to help others or to assist or support.
About me. So about me, basically my disability is 25%. I can work like house. So the second group in Lithuania house. Basically, I want to see all experience in my life, losing finger, broken leg. I still thankful for God that I still have both arms, both legs. I'm still healthy. I can walk, and I want to thank my friends. I had visited for 5 years mental disability center where people was painting or coloring mandalas. They also was singing theater. Later he was exercising, relaxing. So I think in other countries should be more like this centers.